I'm now joined by CEO of Kongsberg Digital, Shane McArdle, which I'm very excited to share some questions with. Love the background, Shane, by the way. Talking about all aspects of AI and technology. Kongsberg Digital are the official partner for the event. Really excited about that. Shane, first of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Adam. I have to say, I really enjoyed that last session. That panel was
Yeah.
fantastic. So many diverse opinions, but converging quite a bit on the challenges we've been seeing as an industry over the last couple of years. So I know it was just great to listen to how far we've come. Some of the problems we saw or heard about a couple of years ago, they seem to be, we seem to be managing them, and now we're finding a whole new slew set of problems. But again, we'll manage it as an industry. We're an adaptive industry. So great panel, great start.
That's a good point you mentioned because it is an adaptive industry, but I think you've got to be collaborative as well at the same time when it comes to sort of technology adoption. I would say anyway. So you can see that with the panel. There's a lot of, I think people had a common pain points, as they say, when it comes to adopting technology.
Ah, indeed,
which,
indeed.
which
And
was
it harkens back to we have a legacy industry. We have to collaborate because there's so many disparate parts to what makes up an asset. That without that collaboration, it's impossible for any one person, one company, one organization to fix it by themselves. So it is a key point, and it definitely comes through
yeah.
again and again in these types of conversations.
It's good. It's weird because we've done a few physical events, first virtual event for a while. It's quite strange doing the Q&A again on the virtual, but I like it actually. It's quite nice to do some
Back to
engagement.
the good old
Um,
days.
yeah, it is like that actually, post COVID as well. So, look,
Yeah.
we do a lot of upstream together. Obviously,
Mm.
you're chairman of the advisory committee for the future events. So you've got a very unique insight to what some of the operators as well are talking about. We obviously talk about upstream. From the downstream side, can you share, let's say, some key strategies that downstream companies can implement to accelerate performance, but also foster co-innovation as well?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to sit in the position I am, Adam, and take part in the conversations that I do. So, between the two of us, we get a broad spectrum of what's happening out there, what's working, what's not working. And to be honest, different parts of the value chain within energy, there's quite common, I would say, challenges to be addressed, opportunities to be found. But of course, they operate in a different way, operate with different margins, etc. So I think if we take kind of a high level view of this and look at what digitalization over the last couple of years have evolved into, uh, definitely there is a kind of consensus now that digitalization should be connected to decision making. And I think your
Yeah,
last panel very much identified some very, very good examples of that. Thomas, in particular, I just took some notes actually
yeah,
when he was talking about how they were looking at the data around their piece of equipment, and they thought that was what they were going to do, build maybe a data analytics problem, make it a kind of predictive maintenance. When should we change out that piece of equipment? And then you have to take a step up and go, okay, well, what's the problem? Well, the equipment's getting destroyed quite quickly. So then they start to look at the operating behavior around that piece of equipment, not the piece of equipment itself, not the data linked to that, but how people were actually operating the facility. And that actually had a better return of investment or a better, let's say, value attached to it than actually the piece of data linked to that equipment. And I think
it's
that,
crazy. Yeah,
and I think that is absolutely fundamental. And we need to look at this connected to decision making, which by extension is looking at digitalization of the work, the workflows, digitalization of the workforce in many regards. And one thing I would say is almost need to remove or separate the asset from the data challenge. Okay? So we've seen this again and again. People start in this kind of linear approach to complex problems, and they get bogged down in this long and expensive kind of. We need to fix our data before we can do anything on the value or anything on the asset. You don't. We've seen this time and time again. That is, you don't have to have a perfect data set. Data quality is important. Data governance is important, but you don't have to start or wait for it to be perfect. It never will. So separate the assets from the data. And then what we see is you need to partner. So this co-innovation part, or this collaboration part, there was a recent survey done by Energy Council actually, and they were looking at, hey, what projects were successful and what made them successful? Just a very simple question. And what they found was a very high correlation, like 83% of the participants in that poll said that where they had embedded a partner, whether it's an operating partner or a tech partner, whoever, into their digital strategy, they saw a higher level of success. So not just treating as a vendor or a transaction, hey, I want to get that little piece from you, like Linda, hey, I just want to get that data analytics around your piece of equipment that you supply us. That's all I want from you. Thank you very much.
Mm.
But then you see, when you use Linda, and using Thomas's example because it was just in the previous panel, but when you embed them as a partner, actually the value is achieved by looking beyond what they actually deliver as a vendor. So it
Yeah.
really helps. And then you start focusing on outcomes rather than output. Okay, how many data models how much of my data can I clean? You're looking at, okay, what is my problem? My plant is shutting down more than it should. Let's fix that. So it's the collaboration elements, but also making sure that the digital strategy, you embed that closely with your partner network. And it can be multiple partners in many regards. Separate the asset from the data. Don't get bogged down in what is an enormous problem and never really going to be perfect. Really focus on those use cases that can be fixed straight away. And as I often say, Adam, everyone's talking about, oh, we need to fix this. We need to have more information. Today, we operate our facilities with the data we have, and they're not all blowing up all over the world, or we still have unfortunate accidents, and there's gaps that we can close, gaps of potential, but we still operate these facilities with the level of data and information we have. Can we do this better? Can we make it more accessible? Can we start finding patterns in that data, automating the outcomes? Absolutely, but we don't have to wait for it to be perfect.
I think that's a good point as well, because I think, I have had so many conversations, I think the last 4 or 5 weeks with different companies, and they all say, I mean, some of them do say, yeah, we've got to get our data in our sort of house in order and everything else. I think that if you wait for that to be a perfect way, you're never going to do it. And like you said, and I completely agree with you, actually, as long as it's there, work together and get it better, but accelerate that technology at the same time. And I do agree with that. I think it's a very good point you made there. When it comes, obviously, we talked about AI. AI is a massive thing at the moment. It's everywhere. We go on LinkedIn, we go on social media, put on TV, you go on eBay. Everywhere's AI, everywhere. Obviously, there's sort of different perceptions of AI within the industry. I'm not talking about consumer AI, but obviously industrial AI in particular. How do you see AI's role in disrupting or transforming the downstream sector? Will there be sort of operations that enhance sustainability? Obviously, you've got plant optimization as well, which is key. Where, from your perspective, as sort of a
Yeah.
leading tech company, where do you see that sort of really standing out?
It's you're correct. You can't get away. Everyone talks about AI. Every event, comes up as a comment, and it can be so confusing for people. So as an industry, upstream, downstream, midstream, we've been using machine learning. These kind of predictive capabilities. Neural networks we've been using for quite some time, especially if you go down subsurface. Because that's where we have big data. On the subsurface element on the upstream. We don't really deal with the levels of big data that's classical, out in the consumer world, which is good on one hand, which is very good on one hand. But we do have a complex data landscape. And a lot of people talk about data being cheap. Again, in the consumer world, it is. In our world, in the heavy asset industry world, data costs something. You have to install a sensor or put in an IoT mesh or something, right? So starting there, we have data sets which can be used by AI, and I'm taking this as a very broad term, trying to not explain the difference between what a machine learning algorithm versus these large language models, can generate and predict, be prescriptive even in some cases. But we do need to touch a little bit on why the world is talking about, what type of AI the world is talking about right now. It's very much on these large language models, text.
Yeah.
So being able to analyze large volumes of text, being able to generate and prescribe very similar content to the original content it was trained on, find patterns, and provide an insight to people who are asking a question in a very human way. And that's very, very exciting. It's very, very exciting. So you can have someone, say you scanned in your entire work process management system, right? So you have everything inside there related to every single work process, or work order, that you've done on the site. And then you put a large language model on top and go, hey, when was this piece of equipment last maintained. It recognizes time inside there as an object. It recognizes a piece of equipment that you're going to have as an object inside there, and it will scroll through all the data for you and pull back the information and say, hey, this piece of equipment, PA20003, whatever it may be, was last maintained at this date. And then you can go, okay, by who? Was it external? Was it internal? And it becomes a very nice way of searching. So query, visualizing to a certain extent, and searching the information. That's a value use case, but it's a very soft value use case. Because otherwise, as a person, you have to go in there and you have to start really looking for this information, calling around, asking. But the foundation of that, Adam, to be able to use AI, means you have to have some sort of twin or some sort of contextual understanding of your asset, maybe stored somewhere that can be accessed by some large language model. And that's the foundation element that needs to be focused on before we can actually kind of start taking advantage of AI. I truly believe that we will have, let's call them virtual assistants. It's kind of the term that people are using now. Asset assistants going around, being able to help people, humans in the loop, augment people's jobs, tasks, even automate away some of the tasks linked to a job. Now, I don't believe we'll have a full job replaced, by next year, but I believe we have a good way to go on automating away some of those tasks that you just don't like doing, right?
Yeah.
So that is happening now. Think about it. I'm really trying to use Copilot, Microsoft Copilot myself, and we're encouraging the organization. We have little sessions. Hey, what are you using it for? And the ideas spread. But the technology's out there, but it's really about how do I use it? I think people tap out on some of the ideas, but if they hear, oh, I'm using it to do this, that's an interesting approach. Maybe we should be using it. And that's where the partnership element comes along. Definitely going to be changed. Definitely going to change things. And we see now, right now we see a big turn down. OPEC is turning down its demand. Just announced there 2 days ago. How do we operate these assets under more cost constraints? How do we operate these assets with less manpower? Because we're absolutely going in that direction by necessity. How does that connect then to safety of that asset? Okay, less people on site, more people are safe. How do we connect that to the decarbonization element? It's still, I know we're in a different environment than we were 3-4 years ago on the decarbonization side, but it's still an important agenda in some parts of the world, and we will as a society have to move there. But again, some of the artificial intelligence elements are solving that. Fugitive emissions, improving, shall we say, your emission reporting, some of this stuff that just it's quite heavy and repetitive. Fantastic use cases for AI, fantastic use cases. So it is connected. It is, but it does require understanding of your assets, and it does require access to the data. So this siloed, locked away pieces of data, that will not be useful and will not be a collaborative environment. And we've had many conversations on this, that people feel that they're ring fencing value today or locking down their value today. They're going to destroy value in the future by doing things like that.
That's a good point, actually, because you do hear that a lot. I think, hopefully we're moving away in the industry from this archaic way of working where people really hog data that they think is valuable to them and their role and their position. But in the grand scheme of things, it really isn't. And you'll probably benefit a lot more by leveraging some AI and actually working with AI and gaining more knowledge from that way instead of ring fencing or siloing what you're doing. And it's a good point because we need to get away from that. And you made a good point there as well about, I do think now, obviously we talk a lot about digital twin and technology adoption with the oil and gas industry. And I think they're adopting it now. You can see that it's happening. But at the same time now, I think it's a necessity. So I think the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to see you're going to see an explosion of technology adoption because I think it's out of that necessity. They need to now do that, and I think it's a really key point. I want to ask you one thing about really about how companies invest in AI, because for me that's very important. How do companies ensure that investments, let's say in AI and digital, are efficient and they really pay off? Because I think it's important education about when you do this. A lot of people talk about this shiny new tool syndrome where they get something in, they're not building this together with the team, they're building it for the team. And I think it's really important from your perspective, as sort of Kongsberg, where you're sort of positioned, how do companies ensure you get that sort of ROI on things like this?
It's a big question, and you can
That's a
see
big question. So,
the jury's still out, like on the ROI and on co-pilots and large language models. And I believe all the big tech companies have said, like, we've derived the value we are from AI as it is today, and they're instead of going this kind of horizontal, they're now verticalizing because they do understand that AI applied to a problem that's significant to an industry. It could be finance, insurance, of course, energy industry like ourselves, that you'll have the second wave of value being found.
yeah.
So it does take, you can have your Anthropic Claude, your Gemini from Google. It doesn't matter. We have the technology and capabilities there. It's how we apply it and start applying it to our problems in our industries to solve the challenges that we have. That's definitely happening right now. That exploration phase. But just to go back to the point I was making, that for us as an industry to take advantage of AI, we need to have a contextual understanding of our asset. The data associated, we need to be able to connect into that. We need to know that that data is evergreen, up to date, it's linked to the correct asset, the tag, etc. For us to really, really take AI at scale, because every POC we run I've been guilty of this. We run great POCs 5, 6, 7 years ago. We picked the best asset with the cleanest quality of the data, with the exact understanding of what we need to do in a very engaged workforce. And of course, it looks great and it's very successful. Scaling that is a big challenge, because there's the change management element on the back end. There is, fear. Is this going to replace me personally? So people aren't willing to adopt something like this. And I'll give you an example of it inside our own organization. So I've 600 developers, Adam. And we were looking at this GitHub Copilot to actually improve development or even help the developer or take down having Copilot produce code. This was super surprising to us, right?
Wow.
The biggest adopters of this in the right way were the older generation of developers. And we had to dig into this. Yeah, very, very surprising, actually. So we would have thought, okay, the demographic, young people, more less risky, less prone, more willing to adopt new technology. But the problem was developers, the older developers who understand their job, can code, have very good experience. They were able to use it to check their codes. And they could quickly go, that was a very handy tool, actually, for checking, because they knew what they want as an output. And then they were more leaning into, okay, that was pretty good. Let's run it on just this next script. Let's just run on the next 10 lines of code and compile and check. And they were really adopted it very, very fast. And then the younger generation who didn't have the same experience, didn't know what good looks like as an output, they started using it, checked in their code, they came back with lots of bugs, and they got very scared. And they got very nervous, this is crap, it doesn't work. Whereas the older ones using it in a proper way. I believe the same is going to happen with the people that lean into this. The people with the long-term experience are going to be the ones to point out, it's pretty good here, but do you know what? It's not so accurate here, and start to refine what AI will do. And this then will be a tool that cascades down from the most experienced to the less experienced over a period of time. It was a very interesting view that we discovered, let's say, rolling it out in our own organization.
That's incredible. I never would have thought that. I really, because that conversation that was preceding this one with Thomas, and he was talking a lot about, and I mentioned this in my sort of interval, that it's the younger people that are getting that knowledge and the older people that are becoming a little bit more vulnerable because they don't have that connection to technology. But that's a really, really interesting point. That's good to know as well, because I think it's good for us and the viewers and everyone else to realize that it's not just about the youth coming in, it's actually that more experienced developer that is using that. So that's fantastic.
They weren't the fastest to adopt it, but they were the ones that had the more sustained value and continue to use it longer. So very interesting from our perspective.
Which is what you want. Yeah. It's not about using just now and that's it. It's about you having that sustainability. That's a good fact. That's good for me to know as well. So, Shane, we've come on to our sort of end of our Q&A, which has been brilliant. It always is with you. You always seem to have some pioneering views on AI and technology and digital twins. So thank you very much for joining me. Thanks obviously for your support as Kongsberg, but also as chairman of the advisory committee, which is a really important role for us. Fantastic Q&A, and many thanks for joining me on this, Shane.
Pleasure. Adam, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. Really interesting facts. Did not know that. I always seem to get an eye-opening conversation with Shane when I have these discussions. So thank you very much for that. Brilliant. Really enjoyed that. We're now on to a networking break. 5 minutes. We're back at 11:40 with our next panel.